In Ottawa today, members of Parliament debated a Conservative motion calling on the government to do more to help small business and their workers, including a pause of audits on small businesses that receive the emergency wage subsidy. And just yesterday, the government introduced a bill to deliver long-awaited measures to provide direct rent subsidies to commercial tenants and extend the emergency wage subsidy to next June. So let's talk about this with three members of Parliament to debate the federal COVID-19 response. Adam Van Koeverden is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion. Pat Kelly's the small business critic for the official opposition Conservatives and the sponsor of the Conservative motion debated in the House today. And Gord Johns is the small business critic for the NDP. Thanks for being here, gentlemen. Mr. Van Koeverden, small business been waiting a long time for these measures. Now the government would like to see them fast-tracked through the House. There's a big push on now, but why is it taking so long to come up with a new rent subsidy program when the government's promised it for months and knew the old program was flawed?
Well, the supports that we've been providing businesses for the last 9 months have helped immeasurably, but it's not to suggest that businesses haven't been struggling over the past, well, since March, really. It's been an extremely difficult time, and I've been in touch with businesses here in my riding of Milton over that period, and we fully recognize that more must be done. Just in the last week alone, over 4,000 new CEBA applications have been approved. That brings the number up to over 750,000 small businesses being supported through CEBA. So it's not to suggest that we haven't been doing anything over the intervening period. The KECRA, as it has been stated a number of times in the House by other members, wasn't accessible enough. So we want to get it right this time so that the businesses can access it. And certainly extending the queues for the next year
Mr. Kelly, your motion today calls for more flexibility in the support programs for businesses in this country and their workers. What kind of, you've seen what the government's now proposing, what more flexibility do you think is needed?
Well, I think this has been the problem from the start with a number of the programs that they just simply many small businesses are left out. The government has acknowledged the problems that it had with its rent subsidy program, but here we are on November 3rd, and the precise details are still not known. It's not known when small business owners will be able to apply for this new rent assistance program, and meanwhile rent has been due. And to your original question, Peter, this government did have a lot of time to try to get this right. They prorogued the House in August, and there's really no reason why they couldn't have taken the time over the summer to draft legislation and be ready to go in September instead of now here in November 3rd.
In terms of the delivery, part of that will depend on how quickly it gets through the House. It's legislation. So are you prepared to fast track it, your party?
Well, we haven't even had a caucus meeting since it was tabled, and we have responsibilities to examine the legislation and make sure that the government does get it right. If there are significant problems with an issue, I'd rather head it off quickly and get it right now, but certainly the opposition has no appetite for undue delay. We know that small businesses are looking for support, and many need support.
Okay, Mr. Johns, let me hear you on what the government's now. You've been pushing the government as well to deliver supports for small business. We see those supports now in the legislation. So tell me if you like what you see now and whether you're prepared to fast track this. Let's look at the clock here. Everybody wants help to roll to small business. After this week, there's an off week of the House, a constituency week of the House of Commons. So if it doesn't, for instance, get fast tracked this week, it's not going to get done next week. So we're looking at several more weeks for businesses before they get the help they want.
Well, we've been asking for months for the government to table legislation to support small businesses, to extend the wage subsidy, to fix the broken secret program and expand CEBA. So we're glad to see the government come forward. But, the delays from proroguing Parliament, even the threat that they would go to election before supporting small business shows how disconnected they are about the needs of small business and the urgency of the situation they're in right now. So we need the government not only to move forward with this legislation quickly, but they need to also backtrack the secret program so that those that weren't able to apply from their flawed designed landlord-driven program, so that tenants can get the help they need that were ineligible, because those tenants are riddled in debt. They're waiting for help.
Okay, let me put that to Mr. Van Koeverden. And that is the big complaint from small business, Mr. Van Koeverden, is the new government measures are not retroactive beyond October, even though, as Mr. Johns has pointed out, lots of commercial tenants couldn't get any help because their landlords didn't join the previous program. So they've accumulated lots of debt. The government acknowledges that, as I said earlier, the program is flawed. So why not make these new subsidies retroactive and further back than the month of October?
Well, it's a reasonable recommendation and something that I think we should be discussing in the House. But unfortunately, for the last couple of months, we've been talking about other things in the House which aren't pertinent to, to small and medium-sized businesses. I know that in talking to small businesses from my riding, that
but in fairness, the legislation on this was just put before the House yesterday. So, and that's when we note there's no retroactivity in it. So, I'm not sure how we could have that conversation earlier than yesterday.
I understand, but as Mr. Johns and others know, the previous iteration of the KECRA program was in partnerships with provinces, and with that changing, it's important that the program, be made to fit more small businesses and the needs of small businesses. And we've been listening to the recommendations from small businesses and various groups across the country to make a program that's more accessible and works for everybody, because we recognize that medium and small businesses are the backbone of the economy, and we're truly not going to build back better until they're back in good form.
So is your government open to the possibility of a longer retroactivity period?
I would be interested in having that discussion, and the first thing that needs to happen is it needs to be discussed in the House so that proper debate can occur, and if amendments are necessary, then we would look at those, I suppose.
Okay, Mr. Kelly, your motion today in the House calls for a pause in the audits of small businesses who receive the wage subsidy. People who received the CERB are right now being audited. In fact, months ago, your party was calling for the government to crack down on potential fraud claims for the CERB. So why shouldn't businesses that receive the wage subsidy be audited as well?
Well, we are not opposed to audits. We are opposed to the timing. The government has delayed the introduction of much needed support measures. The parliamentary secretary was, I think, beginning to lament that we hadn't been talking about this or talking about other things in the House, yet his government controls the legislative agenda and could have tabled these bills months ago. So for small businesses to suddenly have onerous requirements for audit when the new measure, when these businesses don't even know what the details of the new programs are going to be and whether they're going to survive, just doesn't seem like the right way to go. They could put this off until after the next coming tax season. So we're certainly pro-compliance, and all Canadians should be compliant with the law. But it's a question of resources and timing that they're putting resources into auditing instead of getting new supports out or extensions out.
Mr. Johns, where's the NDP on that? Whether we could put off audits of these small businesses to take one other burden off them while they try to get through this?
Well, I think it's the right decision. I mean, but like you just said, I mean, the Conservatives on one hand are saying that they want to audit people who've collected CERB, but they don't want to audit small business owners. We think it's the right thing to do to wait. I mean, I think it's pretty rich for the Conservatives on when it comes to small business relief. We saw what they did in 2008. I mean, of course, this is a much larger scale, but they left small business hanging. They bailed out large corporations and the big banks, and they need to pay their share, and they still haven't paid their fair share. I mean, let's face it, they talk about how they reduced red tape and reduced taxes for small business. Well, they reduced taxes by 1% in 10 years under Stephen Harper for small business, but for Canada's largest corporations, it was 6%. I mean, right now, we need to get help to people immediately. Okay. We need the Conservatives to get on board on our ask for the government to make the commercial rent program retroactive. And we need both parties to stop forcing and putting pressure on the Canadian electorate that they might have to go to the polls before they get the help they need.
But it's clear, it sounds like it's clear none of this gets out the door, for instance, this week. I don't sense an appetite in the House to fast track this through all legislative stages and get the money out the door, correct?
I think we want to move forward. We want them to stop playing games. And both big parties in terms of, pointing and seeing who's going to force an election over motions in the House of Commons when people are looking at fixing their clothes or going into bankruptcy.
Okay, well,
I mean, the government's admitted their program's flawed. Why don't they fix it?
We'll have to leave it at that. Lots of debate on CPAC today about this. And so help is coming for small business. The question mark is still exactly when. But thank you all, gentlemen, for your time tonight. I do appreciate it, and hope we get a chance to talk again soon. Take care.
Thank you, Peter.